A court in South Korea has just ruled in a case that has been going on for quite a while between two South Korean video game companies. Now, this all has to do with a video game called Dark and Darker. Now, this is made by Iron Mace. This is a small video game company that was just formed about 3 years ago, and Dark and Darker is its one and only game. Now, I'm not gonna lie, before today, I did not know about this game. It's very possible, though, that you do know about it. It seems to be pretty well received. It's kind of like an Escape from Tarkov mixed with a medieval sort of aspect. It's like a player versus everyone type of game. It looks sick. Like, I'm not gonna lie, when I get a gaming PC, whenever that is, I'm definitely gonna play this game. I mean, it could maybe run on my not so good laptop. I bet probably not, though. But yeah, this game just looks very sick. It really is not surprising that it did kind of take off in popularity when it was released a couple years ago. But why was Dark and Darker involved in this lawsuit that reached its ruling today? Well, let me introduce you to another video game company in South Korea called Nexon. Now, unlike Iron Mace, they did not just start 3 years ago. They have been around for quite some time, 1994 to be specific, and they've made quite a bit of games. I think their most notable title right now is MapleStory. Now, here's kind of the backstory of Dark and Darker and why Nexon is involved and why it ended up being a lawsuit. Essentially, somebody who did work at Nexon ended up leaving Nexon and started this company Iron Mace with a few other employees that had worked at Nexon. They started developing this Dark and Darker game, and well, you see, Nexon accused Iron Mace of stealing a bunch of assets from a project that a lot of these ex-Nexon employees were working on that was called P3. No, not Persona 3. I don't really know why this had the code name of P3, but essentially this was allegedly a game that was very similar in style and, I guess, direction and a lot of other things to Dark and Darker. So much so that, yes, Nexon decided to file a lawsuit. They claimed that there were a bunch of stolen assets. They even claimed that this one guy that I mentioned that did leave the company first and start Iron Mace, they claimed that he not only stole these ideas, but even stole like certain game code and assets from this P3 project. So that is kind of the backstory, and now that reaches us to today's story. So today, Thursday, a decision was reached by a court in the capital of South Korea, Seoul, and I'm not gonna lie, the decision is, well, it's pretty odd, because it's kind of not really a win and not really a loss for either company. It's kind of like a halfway point. It's almost like a compromise, I guess. I feel like usually you don't get this from court rulings in lawsuits such as this. But this is coming from the Korea Times, and they say a Seoul court on Thursday turned down game studio Nexon's claim that the popular PC game Dark and Darker infringed the copyright of its project. However, the court also ordered Iron Mace, the game's developer, to pay Nexon 8.5 billion won in damages, which is about 5.87 million US dollars. Now, I've seen a couple other sources that say a lower number, about 5.5 billion US dollars. But yeah, it's somewhere in the ballpark of 5 to 5.5 million. Definitely quite a bit for a small company like Iron Mace. But yeah, it's pretty odd. So on one hand, they're saying that no, Dark and Darker does not infringe on any copyright from Nexon, but they're also saying that that Iron Mace has to pay this fee for damages onto Nexon. And by the way, this 8.5 billion won is actually the exact amount that Nexon requested to the court that Iron Mace pay them. So that begs the very important question, why would Iron Mace be basically found not guilty of any issues with copyright, but they still have to pay this $5.5 million? Well, it's kind of vague, but the only explanation that I am seeing of this is this quote right here from the Korea Times. It says, though the court sided with Iron Mace on the similarity between Dark and Darker and P3, which essentially means that the court said, yeah, Dark and Darker and this P3 project can have similarities. That doesn't mean that it infringed on any copyright. But it says, while that's the case, it acknowledged Nexon's claim regarding the extent of damages and evidence presented so far by ordering Iron Mace to fully compensate the amount amount Nexon sought. So essentially, to break it down, the court is saying that there is not enough evidence to convict Iron Mace of any copyright infringement, but there is enough evidence to convict Iron Mace of basically infringing damages upon Nexon. Now, I don't know if that would mean that the court is essentially saying that, yeah, they are guilty of, stealing these assets, but it would seem that that is possibly the case. Because today, after this ruling was made, somebody at Nexon did say the court's full recognition of the 8.5 billion won damage claim is meaningful, as it addresses illegal infringement actions that disrupt fair market competition. But they also said, after carefully reviewing the ruling, we plan to seek further legal judgment through a higher court. So I can only expect Nexon is going to really be pushing this even further with Iron Mace. It ain't gonna stop here. This is very interesting because as I have looked into this further and I've kind of looked at people talking about this, a few years ago when this whole thing started, on one hand, if Nexon is true with their claims that assets were actually stolen, then this would be a legitimate case of corporate espionage. That stuff, it's definitely not good. But on the other hand, I've seen that some commentators have kind of accused Nexon of kind of corporate bullying here. Basically, they're the big company, Iron Mace is the little company, and they're kind of being accused of not really having any evidence of any kind of copyright, but essentially they want to bully this smaller company because it consists of a lot of their ex-employees kind of expanding on an idea from this P3 project, which again was ruled to not be enough to be any sort of copyright infringement, hence the alleged corporate bullying from Nexon. They really don't want this dark and darker project to be successful. That's all allegedly. It kind of just depends on which story you believe. Ultimately, it does seem like that, while this case is probably not over, Dark and Darker will continue on. It's not going to get taken down from any copyright infringement, which, as I said, is a good thing because I gotta tell you, you probably should check it out. It really looks like a sick game. Definitely a pretty complicated case here. At the end of the day, Nexon, Iron Mace, it's really not up to me to say who's right and who's wrong, but one thing is for certain, that game, as I said, looks sick. I'm definitely going to play it when I get the chance.